All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome Lucas, thanks for joining us. So what we'll do is I'll just be giving you an opportunity to answer some questions, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. There's some follow-up ones, but we'll go through this list here and look forward to learning from you.
Awesome.
So my first question is, what led you to get into fire or fuels management?
Sure. I grew up in Moscow, Idaho, so it's nice to see such a heavy Idaho base of folks on this call. And it's the program that you put together, Heather, and everything you're doing is extremely impressive. So congrats and kudos to everything you're doing and facilitating these conversations. Fire and fuels for me, like I said, I grew up in Moscow. There was a pretty strong connection, and I feel like it was pretty common, especially in the 90s, 2000s, and even previous, for teachers, lawyers, other folks in and around, especially the Moscow area, to work for the Forest Service. I started working for a conservation corps in high school, so 16, 17, and 18, I believe, were spent with Northwest Youth Corps digging trails and doing any number of projects. And I had teachers and teachers' assistants that worked for the Forest Service when I was in high school that started, I guess, planted the seed for a way to pay for college. It's what they had done. It's how they supplemented their teacher salaries in the summers. And for me, it was the way to keep working in the woods because I really liked it due to the Conservation Corps foundation that I had. And then it was a means to an end. Like I said, I went to school to be a teacher. I ended up, being associated in wildland fire, working in the woods for the next 20 some odd years. So definitely didn't follow the teaching route. And then, so go from Conservation Corps to trying to pay for college. I got a seasonal job on a packing crew out in North Fork, Idaho. So horses and mules and just clearing trails. They had severity dollars. This is 2001 by this point. They had severity dollars, so I started hanging out with the Indianola Hellerepellers for 4 days. I'd do 8-day trail hitches, 4 days on severity, hang out with the rappel crew at that time, and started going on fires and realized that it was the same as trail work, except you got paid a lot more with the overtime and hazard pay. So that led me to getting a job on an engine in the Manti La Sal National Forest, 02, 03. And it just kind of becomes addicting. Like that was the favorite part of my year, get out of college, get in my vehicle, drive as fast as I could to make as much money as possible and have some pretty fun adventures. At that time, I still figured I would teach. Went from the Manti La Sal to Colorado on a fuels cruise. So started figuring out, a little bit of the fuel side of it, the need, the desires, and the impacts of a fuels program. And then I wanted to be a ski bum, and then I wanted to be a hotshot. And that, brings us to 2019, March of, I resigned from the Forest Service after working in 4 regions, 7 different forests. My last 12 years were on hotshot crews. My last full year, I was able to get my RXB2 signed off in 2018. Still hold that qualification. And task force leader and below operationally, I still have a division task book open, but it doesn't get worked on too often. And I would say up to that point, all of my qualifications, including my desire to have prescribed fire qualifications, were a way to bump up the ladder in terms of the organizational charts as that hierarchy works within land management agencies. So at the time I was an assistant hotshot superintendent as a GS8. I needed X amount of quals to get to a GS9. I needed X amount of quals to get above a GS9. And for me at that time, I was looking for a way to get out of hotshotting due to the effects it was having on my mental health. So I didn't really put much into like the forestry or the stewardship of those qualifications. I would say I did from like 2015 on for not prescribed fire, but offensive or defensive burn actions on wildfires, we started realizing that we were stewards. It wasn't okay to just light it from the bottom of the road and let it, decimate a forest. But then I resigned and went to work. My day job is with Mystery Ranch Backpacks as the fire program manager. But then I've also been able to maintain all my quals and keep my foot in the door. So I just moved all of my AD qualifications from the forest to the Nature Conservancy in order to maintain my prescribed fire qualifications and concentrate on the prescribed fire side of things, and putting intentional fire on the ground versus going out in these, the environment that we're in now, which is a robust suppression workforce and suppression focused intent. I think that's changing, but that's where the workforce is primarily focused. So that's how I got into fire and fuels. That was probably a super long answer. Sorry, Heather.
Well, it just answered the second question too, which is what your path was that you took to get there. So it's nice to hear those two connected. It is, I think the connection, of course, is that what gets you in also kind of keeps you in, and it drives the path that you take. What do you enjoy? Now, you kind of have two different paths here. You've got a path that you took for a long time and then a path that you're doing now. So I'm gonna let you answer maybe for either one or the other or both of them, about what you enjoy about the work that you do, or the work that you have done.
Okay. The work that I do, like my day job, Mystery Ranch, I like that they let me stay involved, relevant, and from an operational standpoint, again, for the Nature Conservancy side, but along with those things, I'm also one of the co-founders and the current president of the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters, a nonprofit advocacy group for workforce reforms, and Mystery Ranch supports the heck out of that. I also credit Mystery Ranch for greatly expanding my viewpoint on the fire world and who is in it, and what the potential is outside of what I had, which is a very federal centric viewpoint of what right looked like, what was out there, and who is out there trying to solve problems. And I really enjoy seeing how big this fire world is and who's involved with it. Like I went on my first Nature Conservancy assignment a month or two ago, and seeing like the tribal involvement, the private industry involvement, and the non-governmental organizations that were taking part in like these really cool community-based like fire solution programs. And I really enjoy learning and seeing how much effort is going into trying to empower people to build programs, especially with the tribal programs and then the NGOs and these community-driven programs. It's cool to see, and seeing other counties and state programs.
That's great. Yeah, it's neat to see all the, I like to think of, I get a lot of joy when I think of everyone working so hard in their own sphere to make it better. It's neat to see.
Yep.
What are some of the challenges in the work that you do and the work that you've done?
So challenges from a fire perspective, like I mentioned it, previously, but I spent out of 18 years with the feds, my last 12 were on hotshot crews. And I think the challenge is, or I don't think we're developing people to like, in some cases, at least from my perspective, how to grow in this agency and in this career and make people aware of all the opportunity that's out there and not get pigeonholed, at least in a federal space, like to where you have to say yes, you have to be gone, to where you're sacrificing, yourself for a mission. And some of that becomes a necessity in terms of what you need to do to pay a mortgage, pay car payments, take care of kids, etc. But the challenges, I think, are showing people the opportunity and trying to give people the opportunity to maintain a life that isn't the primary focus isn't wildfire or the job.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you for sharing that. So this is a compound question here. I'm going to ask you about the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So this is not our normal KSAs,
Yeah.
knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So what are the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that would be most helpful for this generation to develop so that they can be successful and happy in working in fire and or fuels?
Knowledge, skills, and attitude with the intent to being happy in the profession of fire and fuels.
Successful and happy.
Successful and happy. Knowledge, skills. I'd say one skill is observation, like paying attention to the people that do this job right and write it down, practice it, pass it on. I know early in my career, I used to keep a running list of what I wanted to take forward with me as I went up the leadership chain or the management chain. And I also kept a list of what I did not want to take with me, whether it was inside the organization I worked in or outside. And I was always amazed that the list of what I did not want to take with me was 2 to 3 times as long as what I did. So observe, pay attention, have situational awareness, have a plan. We made it standard practice, regardless of who the employee was, to spend a lot of time on individual development plans. And from my perspective, and this is going to change, our individual development plans were broken up into 1 to 3 year objectives and goals, and then 3 to 5 year goals and objectives. And from my perspective, I didn't care if that person wanted to work for me or even wanted to work in the agency, but I feel like you always have to have a plan to get where you want to go. And a lot of people wanted to go back for a master's or go into a totally different field. So we made a plan for that. And to see, almost everyone that we took through those exercises succeed and be, somewhere close to where they wanted to be, at this point, a decade ago almost, but it's pretty cool. So be observant, have a plan. In terms of knowledge, want more of it, and be willing to question it. And, like Paul Gleason said, it gets said a lot, but be a student of fire and ask hard questions. That's what was always one of my favorite things. Like, the system's not perfect. There are a lot of efficiencies and changes, especially right now. I feel like we're on a tipping point of change. Hopefully it keeps tipping for the better. But be a part of that and ask hard questions. And, I always said when I was on hot shed overhead teams that I had 3 goals, that first day. The first one was to meet my superintendent's intent. The second one was to exceed the hot shot standards. And my third goal was to keep people as comfortable as possible in uncomfortable situations. After being out of it, like, I couldn't do 1 and 2 unless number 3 was truly my number 1. So if you take care of your folks and you look out for your organization and you work within the sideboards that you're given and you keep people as comfortable as possible in uncomfortable situations, then they want to come to work and you get a lot of work done and it's fun. And you're able to train people, bring them up, provide succession, and start to delegate and truly hand off some of the stuff that's eating your lunch or that you're not good at. I know most of the things that I'm not good at. I love training other people to be good at them and then hand that off. So be observant, have a plan, take care of your folks, take care of your home life. Like, again, I think that this profession can become so all-consuming. It's still all-consuming for me. And I still take that home. Like, spend the time to separate what becomes a fire and fuels career from enjoying the people that you have around you that after a while they don't really care about more fire talk or fuels talk or whatever. And learn, like, it's so cool that I went to school to be a teacher. I have all these S classes and on the job training courses, or on the job training. But like I said, it took me probably 15 years to finally turn the corner and realize that I was a steward of the land. And it was like I was in a position, no matter what the environmental conditions were, to try to take action that was going to benefit the ground I was walking on and not add to the problem after the fact, and be a part of, I think Heinrich's support from the senator from New Mexico. I mean, right now, this is a $900 billion a year expense, and a lot of it's in the recovery, not the suppression. So, and yeah, be a part of the solution. And again, be a student. There's so many cool things that are coming out between pods management and taking bigger chunks of ground and starting to use managed fire more, because if we don't, all we're doing is deferring risk. So that goes back to being a student, I guess. And then see, knowledge, skills, abilities, have initiative. I mean, you can't ask for more than that. Have initiative and work hard.
Attitudes.
Attitudes, yeah.
What attitudes do you want them to have?
I think the attitude is, I would say, like I said, ask hard questions. Don't believe something because someone tells you something, no matter what position they're in. Have a good attitude and a work ethic. I think it's really easy. You see it in fire a lot, where people start to think that they're pulling all the weight, and they become very inward looking about the effort they're putting into it. But when you look at the team that's doing the work, like, there's a lot of little things that I think get overlooked. So attitude, you need a good one. You need the right one. It's easy to wear your emotions on your sleeve. Have a good attitude, a hard work ethic, and question authority.
Questioning authority. I want to think about that one a little bit. Again, in the line of attitudes. What do you think is an attitude that develops the ability to do that?
I think and again, I'll say question authority with tact and knowing you don't have to question. I'm not saying question it because you automatically think they're wrong. Like, I love clarifying questions. Sometimes people just need to explain things better to get your buy-in or your belief. But that needs to be questions with clarifying questions and tact. And repeat the what you asked, Heather, again.
Oh, what are the attitudes that someone would need to possess to be able to question authority successfully?
Knowledge on what you're asking and why you're asking it. Don't ask an uninformed question because you have an assumption. Ask a question based off of, and this comes with time, experience, and education. So ask accordingly and with tact. But I mean, it's one of my favorite things to do. A room full of folks that are the experts is get clarification and highlight gaps.
Yeah. There's a framework that I'm working on. At some point, I'll write a paper with some help from some buddies, but the framework is confidence, or actually it starts with competence. Competence.
Yeah.
Confidence, and then courage.
Yep.
And then change.
I love it.
The C matrix: competence, confidence. Because that's what I was thinking when you mentioned that challenge authority, and like, you got to know what you're talking about, and you got to have some courage.
Yep.
And confidence to be able to do that. Yeah.
I look forward to reading that paper.
Well, maybe I'll have you help me write it.
I love it, and you're spot on. You said what I was trying to very well.
Yeah, I've been chewing on it for a while. Still trying to practice it myself.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's been much easier to talk about than it is to practice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this similar question with knowledge, skills, and attitudes, but it is, what knowledge, skills, and attitudes have you developed in this field that have served you in other areas of your life?
I'd say the biggest one to me is that first part of the IRPG and the leadership. I can't think of the title, but I mean, multiple books on leadership. But I think it does come down in fire, and it comes with the competence, the confidence, and the courage again. But I think it's having that command presence, whatever, your command presence is, but being able to provide leader's intent and communicate with a task, a purpose, and an end state, and doing that clearly and concisely, and the ability to build organizations, whether it's a pre-established org chart, you're still building it by the hiring practices that you use, your ability to know people, your ability to be a leader, and your ability to pick out the folks that are going to be force multipliers in your organization. Like that stuff is incredibly transferable. Like I use that every day in my job, and now with a private industry or with the nonprofit, talking to Congress or the Washington office, all of those things, the ability to brief out an assignment, build a plan, whatever it is, from a burn plan to an IAP or any of that, provide radio updates, like all of those skills and abilities that I got from fire and fire leadership, because I certainly spent a lot more time following people than I did leading them, have been, I think, priceless. And I think school helped as well. But I think those have been worth their weight in gold.
I think that sometimes my family would appreciate less command presence sometimes.
Yeah, right.
I do find it helpful most of the time.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, you're always, you get stuck in like always wanting to immediately have a solution for what you perceive as a problem. And sometimes people just want to talk to you, and it's hard to shut up.
It is. Yes, I can relate to that. Okay, this is the last question in my series of questions here. But what do you recommend? How do you recommend getting a job and being successful in a job with, now this is, I say with your agency or in your career. So either or, with your agency or with your career, getting and being successful in a job.
And how do you get it?
Yeah.
I mean, I just was talking to someone yesterday. I think that the easiest way, again, have a plan. So regardless of where you are, where do you want to be, identify those locations, identify the agencies or organizations that have the jobs that fit that need, and then make contact with the individuals, really anyone, and then start playing phone tag until you start talking to the right people who can point you in the right direction. Look for mentors. Like I'm always happy. I still help folks, on the federal side that are trying to navigate USA jobs, and what's needed, what needs to be worded, how you need to word it in order to meet the baseline qualifications, because it's not hard to honestly meet those, even though it has nothing to do with wildland fire. But nobody that's trying to get their foot in the door knows that. And if you don't know someone, then it makes it difficult. So have a plan, identify the locations you want to work, make contact with those locations, figure out what the process is for getting at least an application in the door, and then follow up is another thing that I always recommended. Follow up with the application process. Like USA Jobs is going to go from submitted to referred, or submitted something to referred, or not referred. So why were you not referred? A lot of times that's not your problem. That's the people that interpreted your resume's problem. So you can go from not referred to referred. So you have to follow up with the system you're using to apply with, and then you have to apply or follow up with the hiring officials or the people that'll be at hiring events. I like to go, once I knew my application was in the door, I continued the follow-up phase, and I would make phone calls every 2 weeks, and I would send a monthly email just expressing my interest in wanting that job and what you would bring to that job. In terms of getting a job, know something about the place you're applying to and why you even want to be there, because it might turn out that you don't want to be there after you investigate and find out anything or everything about the work environment, the lack of leadership, etc. So do your homework. And then I'll also say sometimes it's hard to get a job. I don't think that's the case anymore, but look at the locations that are less desirable, because they oftentimes will always be able to pick you up. so that would be getting a job. And then once you're in the job, so something I learned, and I think it applies, like I said, observe, especially year one in a new place. But as you move up the management levels or leadership levels, observation or acting like a rookie doesn't really count, because you've been building on this career. You have these skills, you have these abilities, and you're going to get more and more expectations for what work you put out, what progress you make on a yearly basis. So someone told me once, and I really like it: sleep, creep, leap. And when you go into a location or an organization, especially new one, that first phase, and it can be a year, it doesn't have to happen quickly, but your first job is just to sleep. You need to get to know the people that you're working with and know them by name and start to know about them, and build a rapport and a relationship. And that relationship, as you come up, like, there is a transfer to where you become a peer, to where you become a supervisor. And so I'm not saying become friends, go out, like, you need to start setting the stage for leadership in whatever position you're in. So you sleep, you get to know people, you get to know the organization, you get to know the operating procedures. And this whole time you are looking at the improvements that can be made and the things, again, that you want to carry on or that you buy off on. So then you can move into the creep phase, which is once you've got the buy-in, maybe you've proven yourself successful in a number of ways with the baseline responsibilities you were given. So people start to put more on your plate. So that's when you can start to tweak programs to meet the way that works for the individual and the way that becomes more efficient, because you're coming in with a new set of eyes. You're more inquisitive, maybe, and you're starting to improve process, and you're starting to improve relationships. And then you can move into this leap level. And that leap level is when you start to own it, like everything that you've inherited, everything that's coming on your plate, like you have the rapport, the background, the working knowledge to own those portions of whatever program you're working in. So I really like that in order to be successful after you've gotten your foot in the door, you've applied. I use it consistently, and maybe I don't preach it, but I tell people those three words quite a bit: sleep, creep, leap.
I like that a lot. Thank you.
Yep.
I want to ask you a couple more questions about this transition that you made in 2019, because I do see a lot of people hitting a wall, and then they leave, and we lose all of their knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
And people feel like there's just no other way to go about it, and so then we end up with people in a profession for just enough time to get proficient, and then they poof, and they completely change. One of the challenges, of course, is having somebody manage your training record and allow you to continue to grow. And you found an opportunity there with Mystery Ranch. So could you speak a little bit to your process of finding a way to stay in fire and how Mystery Ranch worked with that, but then other ways that you found people being able to leave a situation that they wasn't working for them anymore, but not completely leave the field?
Yeah. I mean, in 2018, I was building a 3-year plan to get out of hotshotting. I was detailed as a superintendent that year, and to a certain extent, Mystery Ranch came out of left field. I was on a fire. A friend from PFTC that I really look up to sent a text to our burn team saying, "Hey, a headhunter approached me about a job. It sounds pretty cool, but I'm not leaving where I live, and I'm not interested. I think someone here, might be." And I was like, "Shit, yeah, I'll listen to anything." And so I, again, be inquisitive, and I made a phone call to Mystery Ranch. I was like, "Hey, I heard this job's open. I want to know more about it." And I kind of got shut down, but pretty soon that same headhunter was like, "Hey, do you have a resume?" I was like, "I have access to a 16-page federal resume that you are not going to want to look at." But I sent it to him anyways. And then that turned into a discussion, that ended up with me taking the job. But I'd say I was fortunate. My predecessor, the first and only other fire program manager that Mystery Ranch has had, maintained his operational qualifications. I think Mystery Ranch is unique in the fact that, at least on the mission side of their business, which is the military side and the fire side, they want a subject matter expert. They didn't want someone with a business degree in that had a history of sales. Like, they do things unconventionally, and I think that it's probably not common for them to see the relevancy in me keeping my qualifications. So I'm fortunate in that ability. And other folks that have left and maintain the quals, like I said, my predecessor is still heavily involved with fire and incident management teams, but that's kind of his sole focus now. I don't know anyone. Amanda Monty is one that's getting back into, she runs the Life with Fire podcast and is a writer. She's pretty fantastic, and she's starting to get back involved, to my understanding, and don't quote me on any of this, but into like the state prescribed fire programs in Washington state, which is awesome. I think what you are seeing are people go for fire jobs in other parts of the industry that are maybe more fulfilling and allow for the time to become a human again. Like, I didn't really feel like a human anymore after my last year of hotshotting, it just, you don't, and the expectations were only growing. So like the opportunities that the Nature Conservancy provides, or structure fire, state programs, like anymore, those are better jobs than the federal jobs. And I don't know, because I've never been inside any of them, but I think by and large, a lot of them do have the ability to provide for more downtime outside of large fire events, or something like the Labor Day fires in Oregon, or the what happens in California. But so I don't know a lot of other people, honestly, that have been able. I don't know of another person like me that's in like a private industry with backpacks that's still able to get in the woods. So it's kind of a unicorn job, and it's cool.
Yeah, I would say it's a unicorn job. But I also would say that there's a lot of unicorn jobs, which is,
Yes.
there isn't one place for people to go, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, you're so spot on. And even within the federal agencies, there's all these jobs that no one knows about. Like, it took me 18, probably years 16 to 18, to truly start looking into the Lessons Learned Center, or figure out that there's a risk management wing of the land management agencies, and there's a whole shop dedicated to risk management, or the Office of Innovation and Learning. All of these, the Rocky Mountain Research Center, the social scientists that we employ, the work that's going on in pods, the amount of positions that are being created in the fuels space, the fire tech. I will say this, like, if you look at, there's a company called Ignis Technologies that's coming on board. One of the founders was a repeller for the Forest Service. You can look at Pano AI. I've met one of their representatives. He's an ex-El Dorado hotshot. Like, there are multiple unicorn jobs and opportunities. If you look at BurnBot and Simon Weibel, and Brandon Dunham works for him now, like what he has done, going from, I'm going to get the drone, the company out of Nebraska that makes the firing device that goes on the bottom of drones.
It's not the Pyro Shot, that's handheld. I know what you're talking about, the Dragon Ball launcher.
Yeah, it could be, but like that was, again, like someone that was just inquisitive and was looking. I don't know his true story. He'd be an excellent person to talk to, but he went from, I think at the time, maybe he was working for ODF, he'd worked for the Forest Service, worked for Grayback, just makes an inquiry to this drone company that has the PSD machine, and they're like, yeah, come on out. And he's turned that into, a great job with BurnBot, where they're building this organization that's going to affect all facets of how, whether it's forestry work or whatever. Like, BurnBot's not the only thing they're doing. Like, it's amazing what some folks are doing, or the Climate and Wildfire Institute and the projects they're taking on with well, there's multiple. I won't name them because then I'll leave people out. But the NGO work's amazing, and you're right. Like, from a backpack standpoint, I have a unicorn job, but there's lots of there's a whole bunch of unicorns out there, and just this really is such an exciting time, in my opinion. Some of it can be depressing depending on the day, and what the congressperson you're talking to or what the outlooks look like can change every 24 hours. But the innovation and the opportunity that is currently taking place, like, it's the most exciting time in fire I've seen, even though the employment, for certain agencies can look pretty grim. There's some cool things going on.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with the Grassroots group and how that kind of evolved and what that looks like for you?
Sure. It started actually at the National Cohesive Strategy meeting in Plymouth, Mass, of all places. In 2019, myself, I'd say there was 3 of us that got the idea from Plymouth, myself and another friend of mine who I won't name. He's still a federal employee. We're there, and one of the undersecretaries was there, and we were asking, like I said, hard questions and grilling the people with the power when we had the opportunity to, and we didn't like the answers, honestly. So I was told from someone I look up to introduce myself to an individual. I introduced myself to that individual, and they happened to be standing by Kelly Martin, retired Chief of Fire and Aviation, Yosemite, Vice President of IAWF. She's TNC burn boss. She's amazing. And Kelly turned her head and was like, yeah, I'm going to cuss here, so sorry, everybody. But she's like, yeah, that's fucked up. Let's do something about it. And then I think we ended up all seeing each other in the airport, and it's like, well, how do we start? And it's like, I don't know. Let's have a phone call. And then we started on like FaceTime with the 3 of us. And then that group quickly became, I think, 6, with the inclusion of Brandon Dunham, and 2 or 3 other current federal employees. So I won't name them, even though they name themselves, or some of them do. So Grassroots formed, and we wrote a paper. We wrote a paper called The United States Forest Service and a Paradigm Shift. It was largely based off of everything that would have kept me employed. That paper, we shot it off to a congressional committee that we thought had sway. That turned into the pillars. The 4 pillars Grassroots advocates on are classification and compensation, comprehensive health and well-being, and expanded workforce. Differentiator, we don't necessarily want this expanded suppression workforce. We want a land management workforce. That is the only way out of the issues we face, is the ability to put large fire on the landscape, utilize intelligent mechanical treatments, take all the tools out of the toolbox, but get ahead and be able to accept fire on the landscape, not suppress it all the time. And then number 4, looking at a national fire service. So from those beginnings, going on 4.5 years, I took over as president this year from Kelly. Kelly's still on the board. We've got amazing folks involved, and a lot of volunteer hours is what makes it work, but it's allowed us to, have discussions or provide insight or educate when budget and infrastructure was being drafted. We've been able to get Tim's Act. Well, we haven't done anything. We've been able to influence, I guess, or assist with the introduction of Tim's Act in the 117th, 118th Congress. We've been able to provide insight when asked on numbers of pieces of legislation. And so, yeah, we're kind of in a good position. We have a great working relationship with the Washington office, and are able to, I think what I like most about it, we're able to bring the Washington office concerns from the field and what the reality really is from the people that are doing the work. And then we believe that the phrase we use, we don't own it. I believe it was created by someone else, but nothing about us without us. So we wanted firefighters as a part of the conversation at all times. And we wanted a place, I'd say initial intent, like our webpage is just a place for individuals to come together and provide cohesion through the workforce. Because everything, I spent a lot of years writing letters to Congress people, independently and trying to recruit other hotshots to do the same. And, a couple letters a year doesn't do much, but when you can get 10,000 signatures and, a couple thousand people contacting their members of Congress with the same message, it's pretty powerful. And I believe through all this work, like a rising tide will lift all boats, and hopefully the positive reforms that I do feel confident in and believe in, regardless of the state of Congress right now, will affect all agencies, so that's Grassroots. It's been a lot and a long time.
Thank you for doing that.
No problem.
And I'm going to assume some things just because of my own, I guess, my own experience in starting some things, is that I say a deeper thank you because I know how scary all that stuff is probably to look at a system like our federal government and say, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
And just the amount of, I don't know, there's probably, if I were to guess, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of imposter syndrome that gets involved in that of like, how am I the one that's doing all this? And so how have you navigated some of those? Are those feelings that you've had as you've gone through this process, and how have you navigated some of the voices that tell you that you are not as cool as you think you are to be able to do this kind of work?
Well, I'd say number one, and I think this is another, back to the knowledge, skills, and abilities, humility is a hard lesson learned. I didn't learn it until late in my fire career, and you don't learn it without failing. So, throughout any of my interactions, regardless who it is, and anything I do, really just trying to be humble, in whomever I'm talking to, respect the room, listen to the room. If I'm, again, competent, confident, and show courage. Like, it's not that hard to educate folks on what they don't know, because people don't know a lot. I don't know a lot about government process or procedure. They don't know shit about wildland fire and what the realities are. And then again, building a team. Grassroots is so fortunate to have people like John Golden as a legislative expert for us, a former wildland firefighter that went into policy consultation. He's been huge. And then just the true beauty of the wildland fire community, like, it's Grassroots is built of retired, resigned, and current federal wildland firefighters. Like, some of them had careers in politics, like the gentleman that coordinates and leads our communications team that is all volunteers. Like, he ran communication and campaigns for multiple politicians before he started a career in wildland fire. Like, I've worked for former UN attorneys, doctorate students. Like, it's amazing the amount of capability that's out there. And so just having a team like that makes up for all of the weakness or imposter syndrome that I have. And I mean, I left as a GS8 assistant soup. My sphere of influence was a hotshot crew and hard questions when possible. But if you get Reva Duncan, who's retired fire staff, and Bobby Scopa, who was at the regional level, and the Kelly Martin, like, it's pretty easy to follow those women and be like, yeah, you're not going to know more than them. So have a good team.
That's great. I want to open it up to questions. Any questions from the group? Do you have something, Quinn?
Yeah, so you talked about keeping your certifications when you move to the Valley Ranch service. So
Yep.
what would be an example of like going to a job where you would lose those certifications, and how have you specifically kept them? Like, what does your job do now to keep those certifications?
They let me do it. So to keep the qualifications after you're no longer sponsored by an agency as a regular government employee, they can They have so the federal agencies have an administratively determined program. County fire departments, city fire departments, municipal fire departments also have an ability to roster and maintain qualifications through IQCS, which is an incident qualification, incident qualification something system. And then you've got IROC, which is what they use to roster your availability and what you're available as in a national or a local system. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So all you need is a sponsor, and then you have to follow NWCG rules and regulations. So I have to pass a PAC test every year, which I go to a sponsoring agency, the Forest Service District, and they let me take the PAC test, which allows me to be medically cleared with the health screening questionnaire, to be medically cleared to go on a fire. And then in terms of my fire qualifications, I need to operate in the role of the highest qualifications I have to maintain every qualification below that, or I need to operate in the role of one of those positions to maintain currency, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a separate deal, and I'm still following the National Wildfire Coordinating Group's rules and regulations for being certified or red carded to go on an incident.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Riston.
Yeah, I had two, one kind of not related there, since you kind of do the AD thing there and you take a PAC test every year. Do you do like an in-depth physical every 2 years or 3 years? No? Have you
No,
heard of
none.
that?
Yeah, I have. So almost all of my career, well, all of it was the Forest Service. And the Forest Service I know is going to drug testing this year. I don't know if they're also going to an actual physical. Up until this year, you had to do a health screening questionnaire. And I mean, it's kind of jacked up. You do it on a e-safety website, I think, before you used to do it on paper. But you just answer no to anything that might be wrong with you. And if you answer yes, then that triggers, I think, an actual doctor's visit. You used to have to have physicals, but it's been a long time, and their baseline, there's nothing that in depth. The DOI, at least when I was there, I think they might have physicals in place. And you do have to pee in a cup for a drug test for Department of Interior work. And now the Forest Service too, which that's probably another subject. It's good to add constraints to hiring people when you don't have people. And then you need a physical for the federal agencies if you have a CDL. So that's when I would have to get the DOT physical, and the DOT physical triggers the drug test system for the federal government and the state. At least it did in New Mexico.
Okay. Yeah, I've always kind of questioned other agencies about it and stuff like that. Like I think every 2 years we go through a in-depth physical, and I don't know if this is a BIA thing. I was kind of gonna ask Isaiah too if they kind of do it there, but yeah, every 2 years we do like a breathing test, a blood test, pee in a cup, and a vision test, hearing test, and it's just like, well, how come we got to do that now, but these other agencies don't, and it kind of, I mean, before this year, I would always, I always thought of myself as really healthy, but actually during this summer, I found out I got some heart problems and lung problems when I was running and stuff. But hopefully that don't bring me back a tier or two, But
yeah, I would take it. I guess a couple things. Like I think from a hearing standpoint, and the BLM, I think, has a breathing test or breathing capacity test. The Forest Service should have that. And this is the other stuff that'll be coming down the pipe that I'm, loosely affiliated with. But what you all are exposed to in terms of environmental toxins, whether it's the wildland urban interface or you're in the woods, that stuff is just now coming to the forefront due to the work that's being done at the Wildfire Conservancy and a pretty large respirator test going on right now in California. But I can tell you that I would have handled my gear, my equipment, and what I was taking home and my personal health a lot a lot more diligently now than I would have back then. So I think it's good, especially with the amount of cancers that are popping up and the fact that you're now documenting, essentially proof for the National Firefighter Fairness Act, which is the presumptive coverage for a number of different forms of cancer, which never existed before. And people are getting covered, whether I think you have a 10-year window according to that act, to be covered, instead of having to have a GoFundMe account, for it. So those are good things. And the
Yeah.
heart and lung stuff. Yeah. Hopefully you're able to figure out what it is and address it.
Yeah, it was just like a pain I was getting in my chest when I'd be running during the summer there, and I'd be pushing myself. And I've been seeing a cardiologist, pulmonologist, and then I guess I got to go see a rheumatologist. I really haven't dialed it down to what it is yet, but I mean, I've still been running, every other day, and I play basketball frequently, and I just had to take it down a notch to where I'm not pushing myself so much. But I always wondered, now that you say that, it's like the fire world and what we deal with, the smoke inhalation, and how much different kinds of fuels we deal with, out there. And that kind of came to me when I would go to my doctor visits. Like, does this play a part in what's going on with me or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it turns out it's bad.
Yeah.
There's definitely some studies out there that show the impact or the poor health of firefighters comparatively. It is difficult to suss out the impact on health of fire compared to lifestyle.
Yeah.
But both of them can be brought on by the job. So if you're heavily drinking, is that just how you are, or is that maybe because you're trying to cover up some things of how you're feeling, whatever? So regardless, there's definitely health concerns within the wildfire community, fire community in general.
Absolutely.
And then, sorry, what was the name of the lady that does the podcast again?
Amanda Monti. I said it wrong the first time. It's Monthei. It's called Life with Fire.
Riston, I think that one of your assignments coming up in one of your classes is to listen to some of her podcasts. I think that's
Riston's supposed to be on it, I think.
That's what I was going to look it up, because
Oh,
I already did an interview with her. I was going to see if I could find it again, because I know I've done it. I've listened to Lucas's and I've listened to Slila's as well. So
okay, that's great. Well, maybe the other folks in the class will have to listen to yours next.
it's good. I mean, just listening to the other ones there, I really enjoyed listening to them there. And I was gonna tell Lucas there, like, he just missed Lila. She was just here a little bit ago, but she's jam-packed with, I think, like 15 credits at U of I right now doing her I think she's going for a communication degree, but she's gonna eventually start going for this degree as well, the 2 years associates, because she's been in fire, I think, 6 years now, and she wants to play that communication degree into fire now and then get this degree as well. And
Cool.
we got plans where we want to make changes here at the tribe, because there's just some things it's like it don't make sense in a way, but yeah.
Love it. Tell her hi.
Yeah, I will.
Well, thank you, Lucas, for your time. We do have another speaker. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and you're welcome to join us for that if you wish. Rest y'all, it'd be great to have you still. So we're going to have a conversation with my friend Josh next. So thanks again, Lucas.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.